I think crypto, I mean, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever else, I think that, it is really an existential threat for some politicians. And I think that the on-ramp, off-ramp stuff is sort of the funniest thing I've ever seen, because you have the sort of Bitcoin people sort of trying to defend the fact that they're trying to make a business out of this, and then also sort of like negotiate and work with governments. And I don't know how people feel about like the Winklevoss, for instance. I read this book in prison called Crypto Dad.
We called him the Winklevi.
The Winklevi, right. I read this book in prison called Crypto Dad about Commissioner Giancarlo, who I think I'm gonna work with him and his law firm to help me a little bit. But like this sort of like weird like compromise of like let's let Bitcoin either be regulated, or like this sort of pseudo regulation that occurs at the on-ramp off-ramp level. I don't know how people feel about that, but it's like such a strange thing to me, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, my insight on that is things like MakerDAO, stablecoins, Tether are the first attempts to kind of route around or provide, alternatives to the traditional on and off ramps, and liquefy the industry a little more, or at least make a settlement between whatever on and off ramps faster. And these are the things that present a big threat too, obviously, I think, which makes them interesting targets for things like, whether it's an exchange operator or a stablecoin founder or co-founder or something. Certainly a big threat to, the ability to monitor, control, and profit from the on-ramps and off-ramps, because there's no top-down takeover possible with this anymore. It's past the Bitcoin, that is, at least. It's past the survivability risk, I think, in that regard. But yeah, the access to it, on-ramps and off-ramps, is kind of a frontier that they can still go after. Who knows how many different strategies they're deploying to go after.
It's funny because Chain Analysis is one of the most successful startups in the space, and all it is a company that simplifies. I mean, it's really sad. It's kind of like, to be honest, I think a big chunk of the company is, I know they have other features, but a big chunk of the company is just a small piece of software that just makes it easy for you to follow a chain a little bit further than you could maybe by persistently clicking or following something in Excel. You can click and sort of follow it more easily. It's really simple software. I know they do something else more exotic than that, but regardless, that's one of the biggest companies in the space, because their customer is law enforcement and government, which I have very little fondness for. And it's frustrating to see this prospect of free money, and it's just sort of, in America, like, we have the worst of both worlds. We don't have law enforcement kind of when we need it, and we're sort of, for example, in crypto scams or something, we law enforcement isn't too useful. But then we also have law enforcement peeking up our skirt when we don't want them to. So it's like, I'm not sure if we're going forwards or backwards here with the way that the government's sort of like using Bitcoin. It's almost even better as a surveillance tool than some of the other assets.
Yeah, it's temporary, Martin. There's a lot of stuff that's routing around it. You can use confidential transactions and aspects of Bitcoin, and I think Lightning and other big things that are coming are going to literally route around the government's ability to watch.
Yeah, some of the exotic stuff that Chain Analysis does, for example, is it does probably the best job that, I don't know, any other entity is doing right now of trying to track the cross-chain hops that some people might do to obfuscate their transaction history or, source of funds and so on. And that's a big thing that they do on top of, like you said, the very simple software that they built to just like, that many other true believing Bitcoin folks would never endeavor to build, because it flies in the face of the promise that maybe Bitcoin brings to humanity or whatever. But yeah, that's that's another way that I think is a concern for those who might want to track, trace, and control Bitcoin/crypto transactions is the chain hopping aspect. But I'm optimistic too. Like John said that there's a number of strategies you can use that give you plausible deniability and also are healthy for the network. Another exchange operator we were talking about earlier today with regard to this story, someone who died very early on, a young woman named Autumn Red, who had a mysterious fall from a balcony in Singapore in the early days, before the Silk Road bust.
Will, any tips for Bitcoin entrepreneurs who are just starting out on how to not get suicided?
No tips.
Joseph, what's your take on this matter? Not my question, but what the room is about.
I mean, I think everyone likes a good conspiracy. It looks like one, but I'm guessing he probably was going crazy in his last days and probably believed the government was after him, just like all the crazies.
Yeah, one thought I had in terms of seeing, how likely is it, would be, what was his tweet history? Because if this is a guy who just every month or something has a tweet that's like, the CIA's after me, then it's not like, oh, he got it just before it actually happened.
I've met people
I think
that...
it has more to do with the people he hung around with, really, than anything else.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Look at the Zappos guys we were talking about a second ago. But then, I think some people actually think it's both government, but it's also banks, which are kind of like... I mean, depending on who you ask, it's probably not too unrealistic, actually, that a lot of banks are government appendages. In some countries, they literally are. But even in our country, we know JP Morgan is sort of both a revolving door and and oftentimes sort of a part of the government. And so if you're really egotistical, which I think somebody was saying earlier, which is totally, I think, true, you might think that, the banks actually are after you because you're going to screw up their business with MakerDAO, which is laughably, JP Morgan's not going anywhere anytime soon, no matter how fast blockchain technology advances. We're going to still have banks in 10 or 20 years. So it'd be really, really the height of arrogance to think that the banks don't like me and the government doesn't like me and I'm disrupting their stuff, so they're all going to get me. I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of this innovation comes with personality disorders like that. I have a lot of friends that think that the government's after them. I know that one of you guys mentioned that as well. Like, a lot of Bitcoin and crypto people say that all the time, and there's no evidence of it whatsoever. And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade that says that, because to actually have the U.S. government after you is a feeling I know, and it's not a positive one. So I think for a lot of people it's exhilarating, and it gives them a meaning and purpose that they couldn't get if they were a programmer at Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, I know a few people who behave that way, and maybe they were on some lists, but no one was after them, right? But they really, that was their LARP, that was their full paranoia. And they're still good, productive entrepreneurs in many ways, helping the Bitcoin project move along, but